All right, welcome in, everyone. Ready to go deep.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Today, we're tackling barking up the wrong tree.
Oh, this one's good.
It really challenges all those kind of like those typical success tropes, you know?
Yeah, the follow your passion kind of stuff.
Exactly. So are we saying those are all wrong?
Well, this book digs a lot deeper. Like, it starts with this guy, Drew Rogatch. He was this ultramarathon cyclist.
Okay, ultra marathon, so like intense already.
Intense is putting it mildly. This guy pushed himself to the absolute limit. I mean, we're talking hallucinations during races.
Hallucinations, wow.
Yeah, there's this story about him. He actually attacked a mailbox during a race. Thought it was a person.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. I guess most success advice doesn't involve like hallucinating mailboxes.
Right, and that's the point. The book uses these extreme examples to kind of shake things up, make you question what you think you knew about success.
So what does the book say actually drives success?
Well, it's not just about playing it safe and following all the rules. Sometimes it's about, embracing those quirks, those things that make you different.
So more like figuring out your own path, even if it's a little unconventional.
Exactly. And it gets into this concept of intensifiers, these genes that can be both like good and bad depending on the situation.
Genes. That sounds pretty technical.
Yeah, but it basically means we all have these predispositions that can lead to success in some areas, but maybe not so much in others.
So like what might be a weakness in one situation could actually be a strength in another.
Exactly. The book uses this example of a gene variant called DRD47R. It's been linked to ADHD and impulsivity.
Okay, so traits that are often seen as negative.
Right. But a study found that kids with this gene were actually more likely to share their candy without being asked.
Interesting. So it's not that these traits are inherently good or bad, it's just how they're expressed.
Exactly. And that's where finding the right environment comes in, the right pond for you to thrive in.
Okay, so we need to figure out our strengths, even the ones that might seem a little different. And then we need to find that environment where those strengths can actually work for us.
You got it. It's about understanding your unique traits and finding where you fit best. Like, it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But how do we even begin to figure out what our right pond is?
Well, the book talks about this idea of unfiltered talent. Basically, sometimes the people who don't fit the traditional mold, the black sheep, are the ones who bring the most innovation.
Like those kids in school who were always getting in trouble, but they had these amazing ideas.
Exactly. They just needed the right outlet, the right environment to channel that energy. The book talks about how Steve Jobs and Pixar hired Brad Bird to, kind of shake things up.
Pixar, so we're talking about like the peak of animation creativity.
Right. And Bird specifically sought out what he called the black sheep, artists who were frustrated with the traditional way of doing things.
I bet that brought some fresh energy into the studio.
They absolutely did. It just goes to show that sometimes the people who challenge the status quo are the ones who drive the most innovation. Makes you wonder how many other brilliant minds are out there just stuck in the wrong environment.
That's a really good point. So it's not just about finding the right environment for ourselves. It's about creating those spaces where different kinds of talent can flourish. But this is all like very individualistic. What about, working with others? How does that fit into the picture?
Well, that's where this theory called the leadership filtration theory comes in. Basically, it argues that some environments, especially the really filtered ones, the ones that emphasize conformity, actually end up weeding out some potentially great leaders.
So all those team building exercises and corporate retreats might actually be backfiring.
Well, it's more nuanced than that, but the theory suggests that if you prioritize polish and conformity over, authenticity, you might be missing out on some really unique strengths.
Right. It's like forcing everyone to wear the same uniform, even though people come in all shapes and sizes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book uses this example of Neil Young, the musician. He was actually sued by his record label because his music was too different from his previous work.
Wow, so they were trying to stifle his creativity.
Yeah, they wanted consistency, but
Yeah.
Young was all about pushing boundaries.
And that's what made him a legend, right? Staying true to himself.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here is to really think about the environment you're in. Does it allow you to be you, even if that you is a little bit different?
That's a really good question to ask yourself. But it seems like there's this tension between like being yourself and also needing to work with others, especially if they're different from you. How do we navigate that?
That's where the book's discussion of, like, do nice guys really finish last comes in.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It gets into some of the more kind of darker sides of success, where people prioritize reputation over ethical behavior.
So are we saying that being ruthless is the key to getting ahead?
No, not at all. Actually, the book argues that while ruthlessness might get you some short-term wins, in the long run, trust and cooperation are what really matter for sustainable success.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also seems like people often mistake kindness for weakness.
Exactly. And there's research to back that up. Like studies have shown that people who break rules are actually seen as having more power.
Wow, that's kind of disturbing, but I guess it makes sense in a way.
Right. And the book points to Dan O'Reilly's research, which shows that cheating can be contagious. Like when we see other people getting away with something, we're more likely to do it ourselves.
So it's like a downward spiral.
Exactly. And that's why building a culture of trust and cooperation is so important. It's not just about being nice. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe being honest and taking risks.
I like that. It's about creating a space where people can actually be their best selves. But how do we do that, especially in a world that can feel so competitive?
Well, the book talks about this gambler named Don Johnson who won millions from casinos, and he didn't cheat. He just understood the math and the rules of the game, and he used that knowledge to his advantage.
So it's about being strategic, even when it seems like everything's based on luck.
Exactly. And it's about building relationships based on respect, even if you're competing with someone.
It reminds me of Adam Grant's research on givers, matchers, and takers. He found that givers, the people who are always willing to help others, are often found at both the top and the bottom of success hierarchies.
That's a great point. It shows that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to success. Sometimes being a giver can lead to incredible things because people trust you and want to work with you.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different ideas here, but are there any practical takeaways? Does the book offer any rules for, succeeding without sacrificing your soul?
It does. And the first one is crucial. Pick the right pond.
Right, so we're back to finding that environment where our strengths can actually shine. But what if we're already in a pond that feels a bit murky?
That's where rule number 2 comes in. Cooperate first. Don't wait for others to be helpful. Take the initiative. Build trust by being generous and supportive.
I like that. It's about creating the kind of environment you want to be in. But doesn't that make you vulnerable to being taken advantage of?
That's where rule number 3 is essential. Be selfish when it matters. You got to find that balance between being helpful and knowing when to stand up for yourself.
So it's not about being a pushover, it's about knowing when to set boundaries.
Exactly. And the final rule brings it all together. Work hard and make it noticed. It's not enough to just put in the effort. You got to make sure those contributions are visible to the people who matter.
So be strategic, showcase your accomplishments. But wait, are we saying, never quit?
That's a great question. And it leads us to the next big idea from the book, the importance of quitting.
Quitting. But we just talked about working hard. See, this is what I love about this book. It really challenges those assumptions.
It totally does.
Yeah.
It introduces us to this guy, Spencer Glendon, who has accomplished some incredible things despite battling chronic illness for most of his life.
Wait, this is the guy who needed a liver transplant, right? And has a compromised immune system.
One and only.
Yeah.
And he's done all this amazing stuff. Fulbright scholar, PhD from Harvard, partner at a huge investment firm.
It's incredible.
He actually credits his health struggles with forcing him to prioritize and quit anything that didn't really matter. He just didn't have the energy to waste on things that weren't essential to his goals.
Wow, that's a powerful perspective. It's like that 10,000 hours of practice rule, but in reverse. By quitting the less important stuff, we free up time and energy to focus on what really matters.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning of the book's exploration of the upside of walking away, which we'll dive into in part 2.
I can't wait. Okay, so we're back, ready to dig deeper into barking up the wrong tree. Last time, things got pretty intense.
Yeah, we were talking about the power of quitting, which can be a hard pill to swallow.
It really is. And I think this part might be even more challenging because the book applies this idea of quitting to relationships.
It definitely goes against everything we're told, right? Like, relationships are supposed to be about sticking it out no matter what.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how much of that is just societal pressure,
Totally. And the book even brings up this example of deciding when to stop dating and get married.
Okay, so, how do you know when you've found the one?
Well, there's actually a mathematical approach to this, believe it or not. It's all about calculating the optimal stopping point.
Wait, a math equation for love. That sounds a little too calculated, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, nobody actually uses this formula in real life.
Yeah.
but it's an interesting thought experiment.
So it's more about like the bigger idea that we need to be aware of those external influences and make sure we're making decisions based on what really matters to us.
Exactly. The book challenges this whole notion of the soulmate, the one perfect person who will complete us.
So it's not about finding Prince Charming or Cinderella.
More like recognizing that even fairy tales have their share of dragons and evil stepmothers. Relationships take work.
They definitely do. There are always going to be ups and downs. So, how does this idea of quitting in relationships apply to other areas of life?
It's about recognizing that letting go sometimes is the best way to create space for something new, something better. Careers, creative projects, even those goals we set for ourselves.
So, we need to be willing to walk away from something that's not working, even if we've put a lot of time and energy into it.
Sometimes, yeah. It's about having the courage to say, this isn't serving me anymore and moving on.
It reminds me of that saying writers use, kill your darlings. Sometimes you have to get rid of the parts you love if they're not serving the story as a whole.
Perfect analogy. And it's not just about big, dramatic decisions like ending a relationship or quitting a job. It can be those smaller, everyday choices too.
Like saying no to a project that doesn't excite you, or finally giving up on that hobby you haven't touched in years.
Exactly. Free up your time and energy for the things that really matter.
And that brings us back to the idea of little bets, right? Experimenting, trying new things, even if they don't all work out.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about approaching life with curiosity and a willingness to play, rather than getting paralyzed by fear.
So instead of asking, what if it doesn't work, we should be asking, what if it does?
Exactly. Embrace the possibility of success, but also the possibility of learning from those, quote-unquote, failures.
I love that, turning those failures into stepping stones. But speaking of learning, one of the most surprising things I learned from this book is that confidence isn't always a good thing.
Right. That goes against everything we're told about success.
It really does.
The book challenges this idea that we need to be, like, brimming with confidence all the time. In fact, confidence without confidence can be dangerous.
So it's not about being a blind optimist.
Not necessarily. The book uses the example of Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion, losing to Deep Blue, the IBM supercomputer.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was a huge deal.
It was. And Kasparov was actually super confident going into it, but Deep Blue's moves ended up throwing him off completely.
That makes sense. If we're too confident, we might not prepare as well, and we're more likely to make mistakes.
Exactly. And it highlights this crucial point. Real confidence comes from competence, from actually honing our skills and gaining experience.
So it's not about faking it till you make it.
The book actually cautions against that. It says that constantly trying to project confidence that isn't genuine can actually hurt our self-esteem.
It's like wearing a mask that eventually becomes suffocating.
Exactly. And it keeps us from acknowledging our weaknesses, so we can't really grow.
So what's the alternative? How do we cultivate real confidence?
The book suggests focusing on presenting the best version of ourselves, showcasing our strengths, sharing our perspectives authentically, and being, well, ourselves.
So it's not about pretending to be someone we're not. It's about embracing who we are, even with our imperfections.
Exactly. Confidence isn't about being perfect. It's about being comfortable with those imperfections and knowing that everyone makes mistakes.
It reminds me of the importance of self-compassion, which we talked about earlier. Being kind to ourselves, even when we mess up.
Absolutely. The book argues that self-compassion is not a weakness, it's a superpower.
I love that.
It's about acknowledging our imperfections, but still believing in ourselves and our ability to grow.
I think that's something we all need to hear sometimes. It's easy to get caught up in that self-criticism, but it doesn't really help us move forward.
You got it. It's about learning from our mistakes and trying again, but doing it with kindness towards ourselves.
So finding that balance between striving for excellence and accepting that we're not always going to get it right.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another important piece of the success puzzle. Working smart, not just hard.
I'm all for working smarter. So how do we maximize our productivity? Any tips?
Well, the book kind of debunks this whole image of the tortured genius who achieves greatness through like sheer willpower and sleepless nights.
So we don't have to burn ourselves out to be successful.
Not at all. In fact, the book argues that rest and relaxation are crucial for achieving sustainable success.
Wait, taking breaks can actually make us more productive.
There's a ton of research that shows that's true.
Yeah.
The book goes into the science of sleep deprivation and how it affects us negatively.
Yeah, I mean, it's like trying to run a marathon without sleeping. You're going to hit a wall eventually.
Exactly. And it's the same with working long hours without taking breaks. We need to recharge our batteries. if we want to perform at our best.
So vacations aren't just a luxury, they're actually an investment.
Exactly. And even short breaks, like taking a walk or just stepping away from your work for a few minutes, can make a huge difference.
But finding that balance between work and rest can be tough, especially with the way things are these days, you know? Always connected, always on the go.
I hear you. And that's where the book offers a fresh perspective on work-life balance.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the secret?
Well, it's less about separating work and life into these neat little boxes, and more about integrating them in a way that feels fulfilling and sustainable.
So instead of trying to keep those worlds completely separate, we should be looking for ways to blend them together more naturally.
Exactly. It's about finding those key principles that guide both your work and your personal life and then aligning them.
That makes sense. But it also sounds really challenging. How do we actually do that?
Well, the book offers this really surprising example. Genghis Khan.
Wait, Genghis Khan, the Mongol warrior, what does he have to do with work-life balance?
It might seem strange, but the book uses Khan's story to illustrate the importance of strategic thinking, adaptability, and, believe it or not, the willingness to break from tradition.
Okay, so we're talking about being as strategic and adaptable in our personal lives as Genghis Khan was on the battlefield.
Exactly. We need to be strategic about how we spend our time and energy, adaptable to changing circumstances, and willing to challenge the status quo.
I love that. It's like approaching our lives with a warrior mindset, but a warrior who also understands the importance of rest and balance.
Exactly. And that leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how to actually put these principles into practice.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into barking up the wrong tree. I gotta say, my brain is doing some serious rewiring after all this.
It's a book that really makes you question everything you thought you knew about success, huh?
Totally. But I'm curious, we've talked about so many different things, but haven't really touched on good old-fashioned hard work. Does the book just dismiss that completely?
Not at all. Effort is definitely still important, but the emphasis is on working smart, not just hard.
Right, because I think we all know those people who are constantly busy, but they never seem to actually get anywhere.
Exactly. Barking up the wrong tree pushes back against this idea of the tortured genius, that image of someone sacrificing everything for their work.
So we don't have to pull all-nighters and live off ramen to be successful.
The book argues that it's more about finding a sustainable rhythm, recognizing that we're human beings, not machines. We need rest, connection, time to recharge.
Okay, so aligning our efforts with our goals, working hard when we need to, but also knowing when to take a step back and take care of ourselves.
Precisely. And it gets even more interesting because the book takes this unexpected detour into the world of hostage negotiation, which might seem completely random.
Hostage negotiation. Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that tie into success?
Well, it's all about learning how to navigate high-stakes situations and find common ground, even with people who seem totally opposed to you.
So like dealing with that coworker who always shoots down your ideas or negotiating a raise with a tough boss.
Exactly. The book talks about the importance of empathy, really trying to understand where the other person is coming from, even if you don't agree with them.
It's like that saying, walk a mile in their shoes. But how do you actually do that when you're in the middle of a tense situation?
The book talks about this technique called labeling emotions. It's about acknowledging the other person's feelings, even giving them a name, which can actually help de-escalate things.
So instead of saying you're being totally unreasonable, you might say, I understand you're feeling frustrated.
Exactly. It might seem really simple, but it can make a big difference. And it works both ways. Labeling our own emotions can help us stay calm and think more clearly.
It's like taking a step back and saying, okay, I'm feeling stressed right now, but that doesn't mean I need to react in a way that just makes things worse.
Precisely. These hostage negotiation tactics are all about finding ways to connect, even in challenging situations. And remember, most of our daily interactions aren't life or death scenarios.
That's a good point. It's easy to lose perspective sometimes.
It's about building relationships, finding common ground, creating those win-win situations. And sometimes it's as simple as just being kind.
Ah, the power of kindness. It's amazing how often we forget that, especially when we're so focused on achieving our goals.
But the book reminds us that kindness isn't a weakness. It's actually a strength. It's about empathy, compassion, generosity.
And in the end, true success isn't just about reaching our own goals, but about making a positive impact on the world, right?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question that the book poses. If you could only work on one task per day, what would it be?
Wow, that's a really powerful question. It really makes you think about your priorities.
It gets to the heart of what truly matters to you. The answer might surprise you, but it can give you some real insight into your values and what drives you.
This entire deep dive has been all about you, the listener. We've explored a lot of different ideas, but ultimately it's up to you to decide what resonates and how you want to apply it to your own life.
We've provided the map, but you get to choose the destination. Keep that curiosity alive, keep learning, keep striving to create a life that feels both successful and meaningful.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Let's support each other, learn from each other, and create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.